Hey, sorry. I think I might have had you muted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Zach, I put you on the agenda. I don't think I told you this, but
I assume.
okay, awesome. So I was hoping that'd be okay. Welcome, folks. We'll get started in a minute or two. Welcome, y'all. We'll get started in 1 minute. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm sharing the notes doc. Please feel free to add your name to this doc. The first thing we usually do for these meetings is welcome anyone that has not been here before. Is there anyone that hasn't been to a previous meeting and wanted to introduce themselves and what organization they're from?
Sure, I can really fast. Sorry to bother you, Dustin.
Sure,
So
go ahead.
I'm a guest. I'm Alex Salkever. I'm a researcher and writer and work with the Linux Foundation. And thank you very much for having me here today.
Awesome. I see you, Madison.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Madison Oliver. I work at GitHub. I'm on our advisory database team. So just joining for the first time.
Anybody else?
Hey everyone, my name is Radoslav Dimitrov. I'm working at VMware and I'm a GoTuff maintainer. So yeah, this is also my first time joining this meeting.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, cool. Welcome. So yeah, the focus of this working group is mostly on package managers, ecosystems, software repositories, and that kind of thing. Finding ways to secure them and relevant stuff in there. Next thing we usually do is review action items from our last meeting. The first is that this is our new EMEA-friendly time. We'll be at this time every other meeting. For
may I ask, have we already done introduction? I was a couple of minutes late.
Oh, sure. Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, sorry for being late. I'm Lorenzo Di Carli. I'm an academic researcher in software security and open source software security, among other things. I've been lurking in various working group of the OSSF, trying to find the best place which connects the best with the type of research I do. we've been doing a lot of research recently on security of NPM packages and PyPy and other similar ecosystems. So, and I think a colleague of mine, Drew Davidson from KU, has been in one or two of those meetings previously. So yeah, I'm here to learn and hear, what's going on from you guys who are in the field. So hopefully it's going to be interesting. Thank you.
Lorenzo, what was your affiliation? Where you work?
So my affiliation, I'm currently in Massachusetts at Worcester Polytechnic, but I'm actually, next month, I'm going to be in Canada. Moving to Canada, I'm going to be affiliated at the University of Calgary.
Okay.
Oh, my old alma mater. I was
Oh,
a
yeah?
student as well. Yeah.
So so Jonathan, so you did Calgary and WPI?
No, just WPI.
All right. Okay. Right. Oh, right. So yes. I'm still WPI for the next month. All right.
Looks like we have Jason Hall as well.
Yeah, hey, sorry, I can turn my camera on. Yeah, my name is Jason Hall. I'm at Chain Guard, also with Zach, but don't hold that against him. I just got here, so I didn't see what all the other welcome new friends people were. Sorry for being a little late, but I'm happy to talk about anything you want. I'm excited to secure some software repositories.
Awesome. Welcome, Jason.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I can say hi too. Hello, my name is Adolfo Garcia, and I usually go by Puerco in all meetings. And I also work at ChainGuard, but I'm mostly here because I am one of the technical leads for Kubernetes SIG release, and we are also, well, not a software like a package or language ecosystem. We are also coordinating the software releases of hundreds of projects under the Kubernetes umbrella. So my main interest and goal here is to make sure that whatever we're building over there kind of falls in line of what other package ecosystems are doing. And yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Welcome. Anybody else? Okay, just to go back to the agenda. So yeah, reviewing action items from last time, this is our new EMEA friendly time. This meeting will be at this time every other time we meet. Zach was going to write a doc to describe means to counter domain expiry attacks, and he did that. And I think that's all of our action items. So next, I think I'll have Zach just talk to us a little bit about that doc and where it's at.
Yeah, hey all. Like Dustin said, I was supposed to write a doc on what happens if your domain expires and you own a package. There's been some sort of high profile, some of it founded and some of it unfounded, but sort of discourse on the consequences of that. And so we tried to write up what are the dangers there if you as a repository are sort of relying on domains to identify people. So we tried to enumerate some of the possible ways that could go wrong and some possible solutions. We are mostly happy with this doc. There's one final component that we're still interested in, which is there might be sort of active monitoring repository operators can do in order to sort of get ahead of some of this. This is necessarily going to be an imperfect defense, but we might be able to catch some of this before it happens. That said, some of those techniques are a little bit sensitive because as soon as they're known, how to sidestep them becomes very, very easy. Again, it's not sort of our last line defense, hopefully, but it should catch a number of things. And so if you are a repository operator and you are implementing or are planning to implement some of these things, do get in touch with me, and we're gonna have a meeting to discuss. And sadly, I like to keep everything as open as possible, but due to the sensitive nature, some of this is going to be behind closed doors. We're hopefully going to come up with some public-facing version of that that basically tells you if you want to use some of these techniques and buy into this effort, how that's going to go. So that's the one final thing before we can sort of put a bow on that document and its recommendations. But yeah, feel free to leave comments on the doc and get in touch with me if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks.
I actually had a question quickly. So is there any sort of measurement of how widespread the problem is? Or like, I've seen the I've seen the tweets and I've seen that all that stuff. I wonder if like there are like hard numbers on this.
That's a great question. I will actually not try to answer that directly and turn it over to some of the folks who do operate these repositories, who might have a better idea of what the scale, like what fraction of your users are at vanity domains. And so, and sorry, I know that's this pejorative sounding term. I have a vanity domain as well. Do any of those folks know? So maybe that's another thing that could be a good outcome here is I will also look into sort of questions we might have about how could we measure the scale of this. Jason, yeah.
Yeah, so I did make a kind of maybe a page and a half kind of document about this with respect to Maven Central as well. I wasn't sure how to really add this information. I wasn't sure the backing of the framing of this document and the outcomes. Some of it was relevant and some of it wasn't in terms of what I wrote. Maybe I can share it with you, or I can share it with the broader group as well, and just kind of get your sense as to how this relates to the document you're putting together. So specific concerns or areas that seem to maybe not be aligned, where you're focused largely on identity, using domains to assume an identity, as a bad actor, right? And then we also use domains to register or potentially re-register, access, recover access, right? Validate control of a namespace in DNS or other services, right? So I wasn't sure how to interleave some of those concerns because, proving that you have access to a namespace somewhere else is sort of sufficient to, demonstrate access, approve access to a namespace within Maven Central, right? I wasn't sure if that was relevant to the overall document you're putting together, or if that's really more of a Java-specific kind of consideration, as an example. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll tell you what, I think Java is a little bit unique here. Now, whether it should be unique or whether more should move in that direction is its own question. My recommendation there is you just share that document with me. I am going to read it. I'm going to enjoy reading
awesome.
it.
Perfect.
And then we can interleave, we can merge, we can cross-reference. I'm happy to add you all as authors if we do that, whatever. Because this is not a normative document. It's purely to collect some of the thoughts of the community.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Excuse me. So this is a bigger problem when JFrog was around and letting you publish artifacts to JCenter. One of the attacks that I always bounced around my head. So I formerly worked at Gradle, and I was also thinking about attacking the Java ecosystem as a security researcher prior to working at Gradle. But one of the thoughts that I always thought about was like the JCenter let you publish artifacts to namespaces without verifying that you own that namespace as a DNS record. And this, I speak about this from experience because I never had to verify that I had a domain. And there was a potential race condition between, like, I think that they checked to make sure that artifact was not published to Maven Central, and JCenter mirrored or acted like a proxy, like a superset proxy of Maven Central. If you were to race and you were to see, okay, somebody published something on JCenter, you could like buy the domain and like publish that same package to Maven Central and like have this like domain. You could like underwrite another package in another artifact server. I presume that this vulnerability doesn't really exist anymore because JCenter stopped accepting new packages. But I presume that this same sort of class of vulnerability may exist in other ecosystems where there's not, a single central repository that hosts artifacts, but maybe dual central repositories, like potentially the Yarn ecosystem and the NPM ecosystem or something like that. Like I don't, that sort of thing. This sort of attack came up. If I'll find the article and I'll post it in the link, but there's an article that somebody published where they found a vulnerability where this sort of attack was exploited. And it was an article called A Confusing Dependency, where somebody actually published a malicious artifact to JCenter when the original author was publishing that component only to Jitpack, which is the third artifact server used in the Java ecosystem, which is a just-in-time compiled and built artifact server where they will, as an end user requests an artifact, Jitpack will check out that source code and build you a jar for it. So I will send links for that as well.
Okay, any other comments, questions for Zach? All right, Zach, thanks for writing this up for us. This is really helpful, and I'm looking forward to the meeting. Hopefully we can maybe share some results from that with the rest of the group after it happens. Moving on, we have Alex and Hillary talking about Linux Foundation OpenSSS project interviews. Alex, you want to hit this?
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. Hi, everybody. Hillary's actually not here. She's the VP of Research at the Linux Foundation, LF Research. So I am working on a project for Hillary, and David Wheeler and I, who's also on the call, have worked together in the past, looking at the experiences of maintainers and key project leads in critical open source projects. And so this builds on some of the work that Nadia Egbal did a while back, but we're looking to get a little more detail from people that are higher up in the ecosystem in projects like, Java, Go, things that people are that are being used quite a bit more. Not saying JavaScript that's being used, but the sort of a wider diversity of maintainers. And one of the key areas we want to talk to is the package managers and the package repositories, just because that is such a critical choke point and point of attack in the OSS ecosystem. And so I would really love to, if possible, try to talk to some of you, for 30 or 60 minutes at some point in an interview, just to get a sense of your experience of what it's like being a maintainer of such critical pieces of the open source ecosystem, the challenges, the rewards, how you think things could be changed to make things better, how things function on your specific projects. And out of this, we're going to extract a bunch of trends and ideas and turn it into 25 to 30 to sort of 50-page ebook or white paper. And if we'll share it with all of the respondents before we publish anything so that they can see their contributions. It's very friendly. This is not like, a negative process at all. And this is all designed to help ideally learn some things from maintainers in really high pressure situations to create better structures for critical software processes, critical open source software production, and also just to help maintainers over time with best practices. If you have any questions, I put my email in the doc. I also may reach out to some of you individually if you don't mind. And I'm really grateful for Dustin for hosting me on the call. If you have any questions, you can also ask me right now.
Yeah, Alex, I was just going to say, we have some folks on the call that you might want to interview, but definitely not everybody. Maybe if you could put together like a wish list of ecosystems that you'd like to talk to, we can try and connect you with the relevant people in those ecosystems. Maybe that would be an easier way to go about this rather than sort of hoping volunteers show up and hear your message.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I didn't want to presume, but that would be incredibly helpful. And it'll be, in places like Maven, PyPy, NPM, a lot of the usual suspects.
Sure. So yeah, maybe if you could share a list with the group of just everyone that you don't already have contacts for or want contacts for, we can try and help you out there.
Okay, that would be great.
Cool. Any other questions for Alex about the interviews? Oh yeah, David's got a good point as well. Let's also post this to the working group. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm just now seeing a request to increase the font size here a little bit, so I'll just do that. Okay, moving on, Patrick and Jason from ChainGuard have something on Java and Sigstore and multi-artifact releases. Over to y'all.
Jason, are you on the call?
Sure, yeah, and I think Herb is here as well. short and sweet. We just wanted to try and talk to any other groups that may produce a large number of items to be signed as part of a release. It's not uncommon for a Java release to have anywhere from 100 to several thousand items that need to be signed per release. So we were just trying to come up with considerations. I'm not sure it would be a stress on Recor if everybody started releasing all the time. I asked Hervé and he asked Jason Swank. We're trying to get an inventory of the number of releases that were made from Maven Central to try and come up with a number of, what the Java community would be hitting Recur with if we actually signed each individual artifact. So we were throwing around some proposals of how we would actually capture a number of artifacts in a single release with many fewer files or one file, and some other considerations we're thinking about, if specifications or ciphers or anything else changed, that maybe that would be captured as part of a manifest that we had as part of the release, and maybe also so that things that were signed today, verification tools 10 years from now would be able to read that metadata, and if specs had changed or things had changed, that the tools would still be able to verify artifacts that were signed today at any point in the future. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. If Patrick and Hervé have anything that they want to add, they can, but we're just looking for other people who had large numbers of items to be signed as part of a release and how that might be handled in verification and Recur or any other concerns that might exist. I will leave it at that, I think, and see if Patrick and Hervé have anything to add.
I just emphasize what Jason said about looking for design partners outside of the Java ecosystem who are interested in this problem. So if you or somebody you know might be interested, please point them in our direction. Thanks.
Can I get a sense of like order of magnitude here? Like how many, it seems like you're concerned about overwhelming full CO or Recor with the number of requests. Is like, what are we talking about?
We're trying to get an inventory. I think we could take a swag at that if we got like a couple of years of releases that were made to Maven Central, but there are projects that Hervé and I have tried and they have like a couple thousand items to be signed, and that may go off like hundreds of times a day. Thousands. I actually have no idea.
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand a little bit as well. So I know, we think of a component, as, here's, one isolated thing, that's got a POM file and here's what's built. But when a release happens, there can be multiple, maybe dozens or hundreds of these components, these small, gabs or whatever as part of the broader release, right? And so what you're suggesting is that even at the component level, there isn't just one file there, there's many files there, a lot of those are signed, right? So there's that aspect, and there's this aspect of this broader release, which has multiple components, right? So am I on the right track so far?
Yeah, it's just, even if you just looked at Maven itself, if you were to release it, it's got like, 20 modules.
Sure.
So it'll end
Yeah.
up.
And we see those modules as separate kind of components, largely from a operational perspective, right? Maven Central, and so that's kind of what that's our unit of measurement, right? But even at that level, it's not like there's an R file that's everything, right? Or a GZ file, like what do the ecosystems have that compile? There's a number of files that can be 8, 10, 12, 20, some number of files in each one of those modules. But anyway, that's the unit we consider, and we have some internal manifests and that sort of thing around that. So we publish about 50,000 of those on a weekly basis. Right, those at a GAV level. I don't know what that translates to when it comes to broader releases. If there's 50 of those things in one release, I don't know. We don't have a way of really telling that very easily. But I think that's the number you're looking for.
Yeah. So if it's 50,000 a week, yeah, I could probably do a swag.
And the concern isn't necessarily around the generation of these signatures. I think it's more around the validation, right? So we look at how many people are actually downloading and using these and validate them. I think that's really where more of the pressure probably is, right? I'm downloading one component, I've got to validate, 20 signatures for every single component, and all that's going straight to Sigstore. That seems like a non-starter to me, So I think that's probably more of the concern. My understanding from what the Ruby folks are looking at is trying to any kind of pain or interaction happening around Sigstore, kind of putting on the publishers, having that burden be there essentially, or the validation happening and caching validation materials such that the consumption of that can basically be using the cache validation materials, right?
Yeah, it will boil around like what in any of the repositories that may be receiving these large number of files. Central, I think Apu mentioned that Debian does something similar. We could collapse it down to like one record entry. It would just, how is that entry structured in order to do verification in the future, or even now. So anyway, it's a sidebar discussion, and we can probably.
Yeah, it is totally. Yeah.
So I will say one thing that we did for the Sigstore Python client is we added support for signing multiple files to it, which is something that Cosign doesn't currently do right now, because we wanted to be able to, like build a Python release and sign. And it's only a couple files, so I don't think we have the same sort of concerns here about that. But I am kind of interested in the question of like, well, what should be reused? Like, obviously, we don't want to make the user go through the OAuth flow over and over again, so that identity should be reused. But then, you could optionally reuse the certificate, or you could request a new certificate each time. And I don't think there's clear answers about what the best practice is there. So.
Exactly. Those were some of the other questions. And just out of curiosity, for your multiple artifact support, are you still making individual recorder entries, or did you make some sort of manifest? Okay.
No, they're individual. So, but a manifest would be really interesting, especially because I'm also interested in what you mentioned about sort of future-proofing this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that's enticing about a manifest, and we can totally take this offline, right, is we all use this internally as well to kind of track things, right? So there's a way to maybe jumpstart things as well from that perspective. So.
All right. We'll sync up with the people who are interested and try and track down some other people, and then we'll try and follow up in the next meeting.
I hope that we can involve some folks from Gradle as well in this. I think there's some really good thoughts around this, and from that perspective. I don't think anyone's on the call today, right? So
we'll ask again in the channel.
I do not see Sterling, who would be the person here.
I think he's still on PTO or traveling or something. So.
One of the things that may be good, I was just realizing that I don't think there's a representation of Jace or of Jetpack in this group, and I will reach out to him and make him aware of this group, and that he should consider joining as well, because he's Jetpack is not always looked upon highly in the ecosystem, but is also a growing fundamental part of the supply chain of the Java ecosystem anyways, and so I will reach out to them as well.
Great. Sounds like some action items here maybe are for Jason to pull together some folks that are also interested in this, but I think coming out of this, some idea of best practices for signing multiple things, like a document that describes that, maybe also like an issue. I guess there already is an issue for Fulcio, but yeah, maybe some more discussion on that feature request or to review it. I wasn't aware of this before, so that's awesome. Anything else about this particular item? Okay, moving on, and somewhat related, actually, I have an early draft of a workflow for signing the CPython releases. So to be clear, this is maybe a little bit outside the scope of this work group, but the CPython, which is the reference implementation of Python, the maintainers are interested in signing the releases with Sigstore, and similar to what we were just talking about, there's multiple artifacts that they need to sort of sign all at the same time. So this uses the Python client and sort of does like a little walkthrough, and has a bit of explanation about what they need to do to set up their identities and things like that. I don't know if there's really any discussion about this, but I did want to share it with everyone just to sort of raise awareness. And potentially like use this in the future if we're proposing signing other similar projects that aren't distributed via a package repository, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for like Anaconda and Conda4, we'd be interested in that because ideally we'd take whatever is signed, the CPython releases, and then chain that to the Python interpreters that we actually deliver.
Yeah, cool.
To plug that supply chain gap.
Yeah, and so yeah, we haven't shared this doc with the release managers yet. We don't want to overwhelm them with discussion, basically, about implementation. But plan is, I think, by the end of the week to share this with them and get them to sort of practice signing some of the beta releases. So yeah, that's sort of the status there. Okay, I'm going to hand this over to, if there's no other questions, to Jonathan about the survey. Also, I need to relocate, so I'm going to drop off for just like a minute, but I'll let y'all continue running the meeting.
Peachy, I don't remember who was the one that originally created the survey. Was that Brandon? Are you still here? Anyways, so there's the survey of languages / package manager ecosystem security ecosystems, which is like a giant spreadsheet with a bunch of questions on it. I, from a couple of meetings, couple meetings back, I added a couple of questions. So this is mostly around like there's a bunch of questions about like what features does the thing have, but this is more about like, has an audit ever been performed on the security of both the client that's being used in the packaging ecosystem and the server in the packaging ecosystem. So it includes questions about clear box testing, which is formerly known as white box testing, but is kind of, the name is not similar to dropping master and main and converting to main. It's white box testing, I think, is also going that similar way. So clear box testing is the term. So asking about clear box testing of the server software that's being used to host the artifact server, clear box testing of the client, and then questions about has a pen test ever been performed against the server? Does the package manager have a no NDA vulnerability disclosure program? And if so, a link to that. Has the organization who hosts the server ever had a security assessment, a red team engagement performed against the organization hosting the server? And then basically a question about like, have the vulnerabilities that were identified as a part of that audit ever actually been fixed? And then are these security checks that performed on a reoccurring basis? And the reason that I ask these questions is because the basis for this, I had a conversation with people about this. A lot of organizations get pen tests of their software before they ship it to customers because customers are buying it and they have an obligation financially to like, the customer says, well, we're not going to buy your software unless you've gotten a pen test done. But because, you know, packaging managing ecosystems, the software is all free, there's never been that like gate to purchase as a part of the process that is forced a security audit or a pen test or something like that to occur. And so it is my understanding and belief, I don't know this is true, that's why I'm hoping to put this out in the survey, is to ask, hey, ecosystem, have you as organizations ever had these happen? And let's try to get some feedback on that, and then we will better understand the gaps of the security of these supply chain components that we all rely upon, and all these myriads of companies are relying upon every single day. Any questions or concerns or insights or yeah.
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, if the organization is, for instance, like SOC 2 compliant, and that's where the environment is, or whatever, doesn't that sort of suggest yes for these? Or, I mean, like this is sort of a subset of a lot of those requirements and sort of compliant, you know, from a compliance perspective. So, are you just looking to kind of generally like get a taste of what all these ecosystems are doing and kind of expose that?
Well, so,
can
I
you just
mean,
put a check mark
yeah.
if you have a compliance program in place that addresses these things?
Well, so if the compliance program is in place, I presume that it mostly focuses on what you sell as a customer, and usually packaging ecosystems are not sold software. And so even if you might have SOC 2 compliance as an organization, does that have the audits,
for the services that are hosted or those sort of things?
Right. Have those occurred against the things that are being used to supply the packaging ecosystem, not the thing you're selling? Which for example, Sonatype, right? Sonatype sells the Nexus software, right? They sell that to their customers, but I don't think that Sonatype Nexus is what's running Maven Central. I could be wrong, but I don't think that it's what's running Maven Central, right?
But I think I'll give this more thought, Jonathan. I'm trying to understand what the goal is when collecting this information, and how this interrelates to other security compliance programs that are in place that are basically more detailed and nuanced, and so just trying to understand the value behind this to a certain extent, right? There's a level of specificity with these questions that is.
Yes.
Is it nuanced or general enough to maybe really? I'm just trying to grok this a little bit further, right? The value behind this.
Right. So I don't presume that I could be completely wrong, but I'm under the understanding that PyPy, for example, is not supported by financially by an organization, right? So I don't believe that, and there are other packaging ecosystems that are not financially supported by other organizations, like they're non-for-profits or there's volunteer groups that are running those things, and so they've never gotten SOC compliance. I know that Gradle, for example, doesn't have SOC compliance, right? That's I think generally public information. Yeah. So I think that trying to say do you have SOC compliance is way too far or high potentially of a bar that we would want some of these organizations to clear beyond we just want to make sure that certain baseline security audits have been occurred against this stuff. The context that I'm coming from is I found this is 2019, I found a bunch of vulnerabilities in Gradle and the Gradle plugin portal that were low-hanging fruit, cross-site request forgery and other stuff. Clearly nobody had audited the plugin portal at all, right? And so trying to, it's both a hey, have this happen, and okay, maybe we need to figure out a way to finance this to make sure that this actually occurs, right? Because it hasn't happened yet. It's not intended as a shame. It's more an information gathering thing to say this is where more money needs to get spent because clearly this is a security control that's lacking in the industry.
Yeah, but this is a small subset of overall security controls, right? And it seems to be kind of cherry picking around this particular audit or red team audits or whatever versus process-based controls and other things that are equally important, right? So I guess if you're saying, hey, we want to dump. I maybe have to think about it a little bit more. It seems very narrowly focused from my perspective, and I just wonder if there's value in that or not, right? Are there broader things that are maybe worth focusing on rather than these really specific ones, for instance?
Right, and I am totally okay with agreeing on that. I think that the perspective that I read through the document and read through the set of questions, and they were all focused on security controls that were implemented in the technology and in the packaging ecosystem, but none of them actually tried to address hey, have you done any vulnerability? Have you actually had anybody do an assessment of the software to see if there's any vulnerabilities present, right? There was no audit of the software to see if it was secure itself. Sure, that has these features, but if those features can get bypassed because there's a vulnerability present, that's not really a security feature, right? So those are sure, you say you have this feature, have you validated that, right? Those are the kind of questions. Sure, you you say you're secure as an organization or company. Have you had a red team that has come in and try to assess that to see if they could break into your infrastructure or software or stuff like that? Demonstrate that. Great, you say that you've done these things. Do you have have you had an outside firm perform the test to say this is what they say is true?
It could be that if you have to think hard enough about whether this is relevant, then you're not in a situation where the answer, like your answer is yes, you're fine. And some of the others of us are like, obviously no. And so there's some scale here. The more you know, the harder the question is. And so you, as somebody who can answer, who should just be answering yes, are thinking it's way more complicated than just answering yes. And those of us who are like, nope, we have no one who could possibly do that for us. Well, we have no way to say that.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on like, there's no one who could actually do that, like do that assessment? Like, I don't quite understand.
The problems being discussed in the chat, like we're a volunteer-led or open source group, who would fund it, and if they funded it, would they actually fund fixing it? Would they only fund identifying the problems? What do you do if you don't have a corporate CEO who can sit down with lawyers to look at a document? How do you get a report of vulnerabilities, some of which are worth patching, some of which aren't? Like, you can't respond to that by publishing it openly, but we only exist on GitHub. So
Right. So that's, I think that the identification of the problem, right, stating that no, we have never had an audit in this space, right, is valuable in terms of the OpenSSF identifying locations where money needs to get spent to secure the open source ecosystem, right? Because there's a lot of money flowing into the OpenSSF. If you say explicitly, we've never had these things performed, right? We've never had an audit like this performed. The OpenSSF can then say, all right, well, this is a pretty large gap that like most modern software that's being sold to like millions of people that are being relied upon every single day is like critical software. These are gaps that we should be filling in, and we can throw the money that's being funded, that's being provided to the OpenSSF to let that audit be performed against PyPy, let that audit get performed against, so it, like whatever organization or ecosystem, right? But we need to like capture that information. If these things have not occurred yet in this document to know where that money needs to get spent. And I also agree. I also agree about like also spending money to actually get it fixed, right? Like I don't like just dumping something on these ecosystems is not helpful either. Like the double side, right? Like let's spend money on like investing engineers to get that fixed and to identify the vulnerability.
Yeah, that's been a thing that's come out of the work that we've been doing at Shopify on rubygems.org, is that sure, we have bandwidth to do things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the maintainers have bandwidth to respond to it.
Yeah, but I'll also say I think the maintainers would rather know about problems and not have the resources to fix them than not know about them at all. So I think audits without necessarily support for fixing them is, not the best, but it's still better than nothing.
We can like to say that, but my experience dealing with maintainers the last time we did this is that they discovered they didn't like knowing when all that happened was they got yelled at all the time. And checklists and compliance documents and did you get your badge for your security audit or something is all of that, and none of it helps. What helps is actually paying developers to write code as audits discover problems.
Yes, but I think that identifying that the problem is real, like I think the problem is real, but I'm asking the audit, like this document, we get that information into this document so that we like can say verifiably, this is a problem and the OpenSSF should be throwing money at fixing this problem.
I came late to this conversation. Obviously, I had a clash for part of the meeting. Is part of the contention that the data, the questions being asked here are sensitive in the sense that they can tip off an attacker?
Open source developers never occur. My experience is open source developers and maintainers don't worry about that. They're far downstreams do, like the corporations we all work for. Some of our security people have occasionally expressed that concern. At my employer, we've gotten moved past that because getting it fixed is more important than having it not discovered. There's probably a problem with other companies, but it's, as I said, it's not really something that maintainers worry about.
Yeah, and just to fill you in, I don't think it was contentious. I was just asking Jonathan to sort of expand a little bit on what the expectation was around this, right? You did a great job of explaining this, Jonathan, and I think getting a broader view of this and where these gaps are is really important. So thanks for thinking about it.
So having worked for a packaging ecosystem, the pen test was performed against the software that the company sold, not against the packaging ecosystem, right? I said, hey, we should also get this thing audited, and there was not money or time or energy or effort to spend on that thing. And so the reason that I'm asking these questions is I've been on the side of the security engineer trying to encourage a company, an organization hosting a packaging ecosystem to say, hey, these things should happen, and it not happening. And so that is a sideways goal of this, is like, let's put this out in the public so we can identify this as an actual real problem in the supply chain of all these ecosystems, and try to actually throw resources or motivation or energy or something at, like, we've identified this problem, let's figure out how to fix it now. Because I've been on the other side of trying to say, like, hey, like, this is important, we should be doing this.
I can say, at least for Ruby and Ruby Central, which is sort of like the organization that manages and supports rubygems.org. For Shopify, we have an announcement coming up, probably not until July. So I have to be vague. I don't want to preempt it, but like, this exact problem is on our radar. Is the ability for maintainers to concentrate means that there needs to be money coming from somewhere. And that's about as vague as I can make it safely. Please don't tweet that out, by the way, just
a reminder for everyone that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube.
It is. We've already sort of said at RailsConf that we are going to have an announcement coming up, and so that much I can say.
Awesome. Any other sort of discussion or questions, or I guess one action item should come out of this is that ecosystems should go and try and fill this out for the gaps that exist in the survey around these new questions. Anything else that we need to do here?
I am asking if, like, these questions are asking a very specific question, especially including a link to the report from the pen test company, for the companies that may have had these reports. Are the questions like going? Part of the question about like asking for a link to the report, I presume may tickle some, or may potentially upset some legal people on the other side of these organizations, inside of these organizations. Is it okay that we keep it in there and ask for that information? And like, we may get a, no, we're not going to give you the link to the report that we have, or do we, like, how do you want to handle that?
I think it's fine to ask. I don't think there's any obligation for folks to share that. I think folks are filling this out to the best of their abilities, basically, so. All right, cool. That's everything for the agenda. Is there anything else that folks wanted to talk about or bring up or discuss?
Is this going to be our like first early ending meeting?
I kind of can't believe it.
Good work, everyone.
Dustin, can you do me a favor real quick and real quick and make sure that I accurately put the questions into the right category, because I kind of just guessed.
Yeah, I'll just review those.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be great, because yeah.
Okay, so here's our action items. Sorry if I missed anything. I sort of just copied and pasted from elsewhere in the notes, but I think we got a couple things here. Yeah, anything else before we go? If not, we can call it early.
Interesting discussion today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate you here.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.